Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Fund for Teachers 2026 information session. We're going to get started at 5 o'clock Central on the dot, but I want to go over a few housekeeping items before we begin. This is a webinar, so Alicia and I cannot hear or see you, but we hope that you can hear and see us. So we want this to be interactive with you. And so the best way to do that is to send us questions or comments through the Q&A function. The chat will not work for this webinar. So we do ask again that you send any questions or comments through the Q&A. Again, this is a webinar and we can't hear or see you, and it will remain that way through the duration of the presentation. We're going to get started again in about 1 minute. So if you want to get settled in, make sure you can hear us, see us. Again, we'll get started right at 5 o'clock Central on the dot. And one last time for those of you just joining us, we will be using the Q&A function to interact with you tonight because we cannot see or hear you. So I hope that you all are ready to learn about Fund for Teachers and have lots of questions ready for us. Again, this is a webinar. We can't hear or see you, but we hope that you can hear and see us. And we do ask that you use the Q&A function throughout the night so that you can get those questions to us, because we will spend a good amount of our time just answering your questions. We expect about 180 people tonight that registered, so we're aiming for maybe 60 to join us live this evening. So I'm going to give everyone just another minute or so to join. If you're just joining us, this is a webinar, so we can't hear or see you. But we do want to interact with you, engage with you, answer your questions. So if you would, please use the Q&A function in Zoom. The chat will not work. So again, please use that Q&A function. Okay, we're right at 5 o'clock. I want to honor your time that you made for this tonight and just go ahead and get started. One last time for those of you just joining us. This is the 2026 Fund for Teachers information session. This is a webinar, so we cannot hear or see you. I hope you can hear and see us. But we do want to engage with you and answer your questions. So please use the Q&A function tonight. Throughout the night, we're going to spend a lot of time just answering your questions. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and get started and introduce a couple of people that are here with me tonight. First, I'm Stephanie Asher. I'm the Chief of Staff at Fund for Teachers, and I'm joined tonight by Alicia Johnson. She's also a Program Officer at Fund for Teachers, and she's going to introduce herself. But I also just wanted to mention that we do have 2 ASL interpreters that are interpreting this meeting tonight, and so you'll see them there. If you don't want to see any of us, you can change your view, but they will be there for the duration of the meeting. So Alicia, would you like to say something before we get started?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening at our information session. We are happy to have you here. I will be doing the Q&A tonight, so I'm going to be reading your questions throughout the presentation that Stephanie provides for us, and I'll be saving most of your questions for the end of the night because Stephanie will probably answer them as she goes throughout the PowerPoint here, and a lot of you will have the same questions. So I'll be going through all of those and making sure we answer your questions tonight. Again, we're just really happy to have you here and hope we can get all of those good questions answered for you and that we use our time wisely. So thanks for being here, and we're happy to have you.
Thank you, Alicia. Okay, so let's jump in. Tonight, we're going to just go over a quick agenda of what we hope to accomplish. We want to share what Fund for Teachers does, who we are, why we do, what we hope you can do with Fund for Teachers. We'll go over our eligibility requirements. We're going to do an in-depth look at our application and selection criteria. I think that's where you're going to want to spend the bulk of the evening really focusing in on. We'll go through the important resources that are available to you throughout the application process. And then, as Alicia alluded to, we really want to spend a good amount of time tonight answering your questions. We anticipate that the session itself, the presentation, is usually about 30 minutes, and then we leave the bulk of the evening for those questions. So please put them into the Q&A as we go, because Alicia's really focused on making sure those questions get answered tonight. So why are we all here? So Fund for Teachers' mission is really simple. An investment in teachers is an investment in students and communities. And the way that we invest in students and communities is through the primary leader of classrooms, and that's you, the teacher. So we award grants for self-designed professional development, $5,000 for individuals, and $10,000 for teams of 2 or more eligible teachers. I want you to think about, as we go through this night, what you really think about what professional development means to you today. It's usually something your school or your district prescribes really to you. It's very top down. Well, Fund for Teachers wants to take that notion and kind of turn it upside down on its head. We believe that professional development is best when you decide what it is that you need to be a better teacher and be more responsive to your students and what they're demanding of you. So we're going to ask you to kind of, again, turn professional development upside down, and think about it from a totally different perspective. Fund for Teachers will never tell you what we think you need to learn or what your students need. We want you to tell us. And so that's what I want you to keep in your mind tonight as we go through the proposal and the criteria and all of your questions, is that this is really about what opportunity can you take this summer that's going to make you a better teacher and a better teacher for your students and in your school community. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we go tonight. I do want to point out that all the pictures in our presentation are actual Fund for Teachers fellows. And this story is this fellow, his name is Jan Carlos Mejia, and he's a teacher in New York. And he teaches English language learners or multi-language learners. And he was finding it very difficult to connect his language arts curriculum that he has with these English language learners. Now, what he knew about his students is that most of them come from Central and South America, and he knew he needed to find resources and make connections to connect with those students because they're the most growing population, not only in his school, but his district. And so he wrote his Fund for Teachers proposal to visit many of the countries that his students were from and collect resources that he knew that his students could connect to, whether that was fairy tales or other books, or see what these students were doing in their classroom and what he could bring back to his classroom in New York to connect better with them. And I guarantee that's probably not like any other PD that you've ever heard of. And so I just use him as an example of, he really thought outside the box. He looked at who his students were, what they needed, maybe where he was falling short a little bit about what he couldn't connect to. And that's what he used his Fund for Teachers Fellowship to cover. Tomorrow, we will send you an email that has a recording of this session and all of the resources that we discussed tonight. And we will include a link to a news article about Jan Carlos and more about what his fellowship was. In case you don't believe me, you can read it in his own words. We do often hear that Fund for Teachers is too good to be true. And so my answer to that is teachers like Jan Carlos. And this year is our 25th anniversary, and we have awarded over 10,000 teachers across the country. And we'll talk a little bit more later in the presentation about how you can connect with them. But that sometimes makes it feel a little more real than just kind of a dreamy idea that seems too good to be true. So as I mentioned, Fund for Teachers awards grants to teachers for their professional development. We do that in the form of individual applications and team applications. All members or all applicants of Fund for Teachers must meet the following eligibility requirements, even if you are a member of a team. All team members must also meet these requirements. So we expect that all of our applicants must be full-time pre-K through 12th grade teachers who spend at least 50% of their full-time position providing direct instruction to groups of students. That's a lot, that's a mouthful. But what we really mean here is that you're a classroom teacher and you are directly teaching students. We don't really care what your title is. It doesn't have to be teacher. But as long as you're providing instruction to groups of students, not one-on-one, but groups of students, for at least half of your full-time position, we would consider that eligible. I know that a lot of you may have questions about your specific position. And if you feel like it's not answered tonight, you can reply to the email we send tomorrow with your specific role and responsibilities, and we can provide clarification on whether or not your position would be eligible. Our second requirement is that you intend to return to teaching in the consecutive school year. So if you're thinking about retiring or you're moving into administration, we'd ask that you save this opportunity for someone who is returning to the classroom. And you'll note that we use the word intends to return. We know things happen. You might move into a different grade, you might teach a different subject. But as long as you're intending to return to teaching, that's what we're looking for. We do ask that you have at least 3 years of teaching experience. It does not have to be in your same school, your same district, the same state, the same country. As long as you have 3 total years of experience in a pre-K through 12th grade setting, that's what we're looking for. We do not count student teaching towards this 3-year requirement. I know there might be some principals on the call tonight or administrators. Administrators are generally, as a rule, not eligible because they don't meet these 3 require, or at least the top requirement. We know that there are schools and districts that may have unique positions that don't apply to everyone. So again, if you have a question about your independent eligibility, if you'll just reply to that email you get tomorrow. The last eligibility requirement that we have is if you have received a grant from Fund for Teachers previously, that you wait at least 5 years before reapplying. Alicia, are there any eligibility questions? Okay, we'll keep going. Okay, so the biggest part of tonight, what we want to do is spend time talking about the actual proposal that we ask you to submit to Fund for Teachers. And I know for a lot of you, this might be the first time that you're writing a grant proposal like this. We're a little unique and that this is a more of a personal experience. This has a lot to do with who you are as a teacher. You'll see we ask for very little data. We're not looking for test scores and that kind of thing that you might see in a traditional educational proposal. And so that's why we like to spend a little more time going through the questions and talking about how we select our grant winners as we go through. And so all applicants are required to complete the Fund for Teachers proposal online. We do provide a set of questions that we think all applicants should answer, and those questions are broken into 5 sections. These questions are available to you online through our application guidelines, so I won't read you all the questions tonight. What I'm going to do is just give you sort of the overarching goal of each section so that you can understand what's expected of you. But I don't want you to feel limited by these questions. This is more of a narrative. This is not you just write a 1-sentence answer to each question. This really does require a great deal of detail. And so again, you must answer the questions we provide, but don't feel limited by them. And I just want you to know that this is not something that you can write in one sitting. This is something that's going to take you a little bit of time to do, and it's not something that you can just knock out this weekend. It's really something that's going to take time and a lot of detail. So keep those things in mind as we move through. Before we get into the actual proposal itself, I think it's really important to understand who you're writing your proposal for. And so we're going to spend a couple minutes just talking about our selection process and the scoring criteria that we provide to you. So at Fund for Teachers, Alicia and I and the rest of our team, whether that's in a location where we have a partner or here at the national office, we do not get to pick who wins or who is awarded our grants. We put together a committee of past grant recipients, community members, donors, people who are generally interested in education, perhaps someone from your school district or school community. And we trust them to make the decisions based on the merit of the proposals that they receive to review. Each selection committee member is given this same scoring criteria that you see on your screen in front of you. This is also available in the application guidelines and on our website in the online learning center, links to which you will receive in the email we send tomorrow. But we kind of joke that this scoring criteria is sort of like an open book test. We're giving you exactly what we are expecting. This is the same criteria our selection committee uses. And I also give you this information because I want you to remember who you're writing for. So yes, there are other educators, teachers who have previously been awarded Fund for Teachers Fellowship, maybe an administrator, someone, a principal or superintendent. You know what they're looking for, you know who they are, you know how they review proposals. But someone that you maybe did not consider while you were writing your proposal or as you're thinking about your proposal is those donors and community members. They could be individuals who've never been a teacher, who've never been in a classroom, at least since they were a student. And so I want you to keep them in mind as you're writing. We talk a little bit about the end about some pitfalls to avoid, but something specifically I want you to think about is how you write and the jargon we use every day, and that donor or community member may not understand those words or that language, and so you want to keep them in mind as you're writing your proposal. So that's a little bit about the scoring criteria and who our selection committee is. Alicia, are there any questions before we jump into the proposal?
Yes, we have a couple
Great.
questions. We're going to go back a little bit to eligibility,
Okay.
just about whether or not teachers can apply from different districts, from different schools. You may have touched on that already,
Uh,
but if you don't
That's a
mind answering that again.
Yeah, that's a great question. We want you to apply with who you work best with. So it doesn't matter to us if you're in the same school, district, city, or even state. If you are applying with someone from a different state, if you'll just let us know, because we'll give you some specific directions on how to do that. But we encourage any kind of collaboration that you think is going to help your project have the greatest impact on your particular students and school community. I will say that when you have those kind of cross city or district teams, the onus is on you as the applicant to explain how you will work together and why working together is really necessary for the success of this project. So I would consider that. And I would also consider, as you're choosing who you work with, that um, this is the kind of project that you probably haven't done with someone that you just work with. So choose your team members wisely, and make sure there's someone that you could work with in this capacity. Alicia, is that good? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to dive right into the proposal section. These screens have a lot of information on them. I'm not going to read you all of the questions, but I did this because I want you to be able to see. On the top, you'll see the scoring criteria. This box at the top is what the criteria are that our selection committee are looking for. And underneath are the questions that we ask, and you'll kind of see how they work together. But what Alicia and I are going to do tonight is kind of give you the overarching goal of each section and some tips and feedback that we've heard from our selection committee. Again, these questions and the scoring criteria are found in the application guidelines and in the online learning center on our website. And we'll send you those links tomorrow. So don't worry about trying to write all this down tonight, and really focus in on what the overarching goals are. So in the fellowship purpose and overarching goals section of the application, what we're really looking for here is, what do you want to learn and why? And I want to really focus in on those words, learn, like what do you want to learn? Fund for Teachers gets kind of a bad rap as a travel grant, and we're not a travel grant. We're a professional development grant. If you want to stay in your city or your backyard and learn something, that's what I want you to do. If your grant takes you to another country or a place, I want you to do that too, but that's your decision. And so what we really want applicants to stay away from is thinking that you must travel or you have to go somewhere. And so that's why we focus on that language. What do you want to learn? Not where do you want to go? Not what do you want to do, but what do you want to learn and why is it important for not only you, but your students and school community? Um, and so I want you to keep that in mind. This section is about what you want to learn and why. Again, keep in mind those committee members who are not educators. And as you're writing, make sure you're explaining to them why this learning is relevant to your student, who your students are, who you are. Our application process is completely anonymous. So Fund for Teachers will not provide your name, your school information, what you teach, who you teach, anything about you to the committee. It's on you to communicate to them anonymously. So I'll spend a second talking about that in just a moment, but communicating to them what you teach and who you teach and why this project is so important for them and necessary for you to do for both your own personal success, but also your student success. And as I mentioned, I'm going to just spend a second talking about what we mean anonymous. So again, we don't provide any information about you to the selection committee. And we do ask you to avoid including your name, your school name, or anything that could identify you in the grant writing process because we don't want to create any bias for or against any applicant. Some proposals are read in a city or state where they're not where they're taking place, and others are read in communities. I'll use as an example Houston. We have a Houston program, and those applications are read and scored in Houston by people in Houston. And so if Alicia submitted a proposal that said that she was from Houston ISD, the largest urban school district in the state of Texas, they would know where that is and what school district she's in. Instead, she could say, I teach in a large urban school district in the city of Houston, but she doesn't need to name the district. By the way, for those of you not familiar with Houston, we have over 40 school districts in Houston proper. So, you don't need to say the name of the district for people to get an understanding of what the environment is like. When we ask you who your students are, we're not asking for their names. We're asking for things about like, where are they from? Maybe what's their socioeconomic background? Are they gifted and talented? Are they on the spectrum? Who is the particular population that you teach? And what is important for us to know about them to make sense of what it is you want to learn? Again, you're not including your name and you're not including your school name. You can include the city or the state that you are. That's usually not too much information, but if it is, we'll let you know as we review because we do a screening first for eligibility, and we will let you know if something needs to be taken out. But generally, you want to avoid naming yourself and your school or your district just to, again, prevent any bias. Not only against you, but for you, because we have seen that happen in the past. And so that's why we ask you not to include that information. Going back to this section, I'm going to keep saying this over and over tonight. This is what it is you want to learn and why, and what your goals are. If your goals are really clear up front, the rest of the proposal really falls into place. As you see, the goals are going to be from your perspective as a teacher, from the perspective of your students and your community stakeholders. And so if you have these clear goals up front, I really feel that it kind of all falls into place. And so if they're strong here, you really have a good foundation for the rest of your proposal. Moving on to the second section, this is what we refer to as your fellowship learning plan. You'll see again, it's learning, it's not where you're going. But we do ask you here. So if the first section is what are you learning? And the second section is how are you learning? So if that's attending a conference or a workshop, that's where you're going to go learn. If you are going to museums or a different country to do a volunteer project, why did you pick those particular locations? Why did you pick that conference or that workshop? Each location or destination or activity is essentially showing how you're meeting the learning goals that you set forth in section 1. And so all these activities should be tied back to those goals. And readers shouldn't feel like there's an activity that doesn't really make sense to what it is you want to learn. And if you start feeling that yourself as you're writing, you might want to go back to section 1 and improve on or get more in depth on what those learning goals are so that every activity in this section meets those learning goals from section 1. You don't want readers to be surprised by, oh, here's the goals in section 2. You really want those in section 1. And each goal is answered kind of by an activity in section 2. This is not an itinerary like day 1, I'm going to Maui and I'm going to do this, or day 2, I'm going to this museum. you can list the things and the places that you're going to do or that you're going to see, but it shouldn't be taken directly from a travel brochure or a website. Every activity really needs to be written in your own words, how it relates to those learning goals. This is one of the most common pitfalls we see, particularly in this section, is that sometimes applicants just list a day-by-day set of activities, but the activities are not connected by the applicant to the learning goal. Another common pitfall we see is that applicants do just copy and paste if they're working with a tour group, or something like that, that they just copy and paste those activities into their proposal. First and foremost, that's plagiarism. And second of all, that's so impersonal and that doesn't reflect what it is that you as the individual teacher are trying to learn and how it is related to your students. And so keep that in mind as you're writing. Alicia, are there any questions on the first two sections? Or we should move?
I mean, I think so. If you would like to talk about, since they're designing a fellowship learning plan that may include experts or researchers,
Mhm.
even though it's an anonymous process and they're not mentioning who they are themselves, can they include names of people whom they intend to learn from?
Absolutely. Yes, please do. It lends credibility to your proposal. It shows foresight and planning. So you definitely want to include that reference. Most of our selection committee is really good about not going on their own fact-finding mission and verifying things that you say or checking with experts. They really are trusting what you put in the proposal. But I always say as much information as you can give a committee member is the best. And any advanced planning that you can show, it really makes the selection committee buy into what you're doing, feel confident that you have a plan and that you can accomplish the plan. So definitely you can include that kind of information. Good, great. Okay, we're going to move on to section 3, which is teacher growth and learning. And this is what I think, and I think Alicia would agree, probably one of the most difficult sections we find for applicants. And I have a kind of a trick that you're going to think is really corny when I tell it to you, but I want you to try to write this section of your proposal without using the word student.
Mhm.
Every day, everything you do is about your students and what they're learning, what they're accomplishing, what you can do for them. And so that's sort of how you think. You're not thinking about yourself as a professional or what this could mean for your career or your classroom or your community. You're always thinking about students. And I find, and we have feedback from selection committees, that they feel like sometimes applicants are just full on students, the whole proposal. It's never really reflecting on their own practice and what could make them a better teacher. And not just in the next school year or the next semester, but over the term of their career. What could this experience mean for you as a professional? How could it push your boundaries and help you grow and learn as a professional? Fun for Teachers believes you are professionals. You know what's best for you as a professional. And so we're looking here for you to really show us why this is the best thing for you as a teacher. And so I know that challenge seems silly, but you'll be surprised how often that you use the word student and you sort of fall back to them. And so I want you just in your drafts, not in your final. You can obviously use the word student, but as you're writing and you're kind of putting ideas on paper, try not to use that word student. And I think it'll help you hone in on why this is so important to you as a professional. Um, and so just trust me on that and try that. I do think it is helpful, a helpful approach for this section. But again, this section is about how you will grow and learn as a professional and personally. And then the next section, which is student and stakeholder experience, is all about your students and your school community and how they'll benefit and why it's so important for them to have this experience with you through the summer. Um, I want you to think about, yes, your students are the students in your classroom or in the grade that you teach, or if you're an ancillary teacher, maybe they're all the students in your school, or maybe they're all the students in a grade level. But the stakeholders for this project for you They'll be different for everyone. No two applicants are going to have the same community. But I want you to think a little more broadly about your community. How could this grant have a bigger impact on the stakeholders of your school community? If you're an art teacher, let's say, it could be all the art teachers in your feeder pattern of your particular elementary school. Maybe it's all the art teachers in your district. Maybe you're doing a cross-curricular project where the art and the science teachers are working together. Those could be the stakeholders. Maybe you're like Jan Carlos that we mentioned at the beginning, and his was all the new arrival students and their families and the community, that the literal community that surrounded his school. Those are all different versions of stakeholders, and those vary greatly on what you teach, who you teach, and what the goals of your project are. But I want you to really think more broadly and not just think about those four walls of your classroom or just this semester, but how could this project have a greater impact? We want you to be realistic. You don't have to have some pie in the sky, really dreamy project that you think is going to get the selection committee's attention. We're not looking for that. We do want realistic expectations for you. And just like in the fellowship learning plan section where Alicia mentioned having experts and mentioning them in your proposal, think about who you could talk to in your school community, like a principal or an administrator, and you could put in this section, I've talked to my principal about doing this. I've talked to the district about doing this, and I've got their permission to do XYZ, or they're open to having an event about this or that. Again, it's the same as the experts. It sort of lends credibility to your proposal. It shows that you've given some planning and foresight, and that you have buy-in from those stakeholders. So I think that's also important in this section, but I do want to challenge you to think more broadly about who this project could impact. The last section of the application is our budget narrative. And this is a narrative. This is not a line item list of your expenses. And this is something a little different, I think, than a lot of other grant applications you might be used to if you have written grants before. What we're really looking for here is the research that you put into with the amount that you're asking Fund for Teachers for. $5,000 and $10,000 is not a little bit of money. And so we want the selection committee to feel confident that you've done the research for the amount that you've asked for. So again, it's not a line item list of expenses. Selection committee members should not be surprised by anything they see in the budget. They should have seen places and things that you might have needed for your project somewhere else in your proposal. We could spend a lot of time talking about budgets. I won't go into all the big details here about all the things you can ask for. Again, those are in our application guidelines. But something I do want to mention is, please do not under budget. The lowest cost project does not mean the best project. It does not mean the most fundable project. It's just low cost, and that's not what we're interested in. We want you to ask for what you need to make your project happen. I cannot give you more money if you're awarded and then you realize, oh, I should have asked for more. We can't give you more than what you ask for in your proposal. We also think it's important that you know the way that our payments are structured. We will notify you of awards at the end of March. You will have to attend an orientation meeting virtually, just like this Zoom. In some cases, they're in person, but very few. But you attend a meeting, you do some paperwork, and then you will generally receive your check mid to late April or into early May. And we give you 90% upfront and 10% when you complete your post-fellowship reporting. So when you're thinking about your budget, what can you comfortably do with 90% of your grant funds in the summer? And how much money do you really need to make the project happen? And ask for it. Please do not under budget. Just make sure you're showing the research. Your safety is important to us, and so we're not expecting you to stay in a hostel, but we're also not paying for the Four Seasons. So just kind of keep that balance in mind. Another kind of tip I can give you, and the only other thing I'll talk about in budgets, is we know that airfare is very difficult to budget for at this time of year for a project that will happen in the summer. I know most airlines are showing prices up to October, in some cases, mid-November of next year, but not much farther. So you can see prices for summer, but know that those prices are going to be increased. So let's say if you're showing your research to a committee member, and yes, I'm giving you the example for airlines, but this can apply to all budget areas. Let's say a flight from Houston to France, as of today for a June trip, is showing $1,200 round trip. I'm flying from Houston to Paris. On one airline, it's $1,200. On another airline, it's $1,800. What I would advise you to do is ask for either $1,600 or $1,800. Ask for the high end and account for that in your budget and say, I researched on these airlines. The lowest cost was $1,200. The highest cost was $1,800. I'm asking for $1,800 because I know that the cost will increase in the summer. If the costs don't increase, I can use those excess funds for other things that I didn't ask for, such as, and you can add those things in. But you're padding it a little bit, but you're padding it within reason, and you're also asking for as much as you need if you're able to have this experience. So again, don't under budget. Make sure you're not surprising selection committee members in the budget with something that doesn't appear anywhere else in your proposal. And just make sure you're explaining that and your research and your thought, just like that example I gave you. I know that that was all really fast through the sections of the proposal. So Alicia, is there anything you think I need to go back to or elaborate on before we move on?
Yes, we've got two questions that are a lot of people have asked. So I'll give you the first one first. Can you speak a little to how to go about writing this as a team grant? A couple different people have asked questions such as, do we write just one application if we're a team? Do we each write an application if we're a team? How does that work? And if you could, because of your level of expertise and having been at Fund for Teachers for so long, speak a little bit to how do they collaborate in the actual writing process as a team?
Okay, those are really great questions. I'm sorry, teams, sometimes we know we need to give you more information and I always forget about that. Sorry. Okay, so in the team process, you're only submitting one proposal. It should be a collaborative effort. That doesn't mean that, if Alicia and I were applying together, that I would write one paragraph and then she writes the next. No, it needs to be one unified proposal. So that generally means that one person will take on that effort of writing. But if you have two team members or 27, you each need to sit down and talk about what the goals are and what you each hope to gain from this experience. Something that's really important for teams to know is that you are each individually financially responsible for your portion of the grant. So even though one person might be writing it, you're responsible for your portion of this, for not only the finances, but the learning and the implementation. And so that's why we think it's so important that you collaborate on the project together, the writing of the proposal, the ideas, the activities, every ounce of this should not just fall on one person. It really needs to be a collaborative effort. I know that's difficult when writing one unified proposal. So two things I'm hearing in those questions. One is, let's say Alicia and I are writing a team proposal and we teach different subjects or we teach in different places. Maybe we teach different grades. How do we answer these questions so that each team member is recognized? Because we do ask you who you are, what do you teach? So team applicants generally do this in two ways. Either both of them, so if they're this team of two, this imaginary team, Alicia and I, if we have the same goals, we teach the same thing, but maybe we teach different grade levels, but we think the outcomes are the same for us. The goals are the same. That's a lot easier. You can say Stephanie and Alicia both teach third grade. Stephanie teaches art and Alicia teaches English language arts. And together their goals are XYZ. And that's very clear. Alicia and Stephanie teach in the same school or district, and all of the students have the same demographic background. They're all the same kind of students. That's a more simpler way of doing it. But let's say Alicia and I don't teach the same thing and we don't teach in the same grade level or the same school. Team applicants generally handle this in one of two ways. They'll refer to each other as, well, teacher A is a math teacher and she's taught in a suburban school district for 20 years. Teacher B is a science teacher in a rural school district and she's new to teaching. She's only been teaching 3 years. And we're choosing to partner together because of XYZ. So we've identified both individual teachers and then our goals, and we've named them teacher A or teacher B, or I could refer to them as the math teacher or the science teacher, however you feel comfortable doing that. But you're identifying both teachers. You've described both unique teaching environments, and then you can do the same thing. Stephanie's student or teacher A students are low 90% free and reduced lunch, while teacher B's students are whatever you want, 25% or some, whatever is important to the or relevant to your individual proposal. And so as they progress through the proposal, they're going to do that same treatment. Teacher A is this and teacher B is that. But what I think the second kind of part of that question that Alicia was asking was, is there something else selection committee members are looking for? And that's collaboration. And we touched on that a little bit at the beginning. It's on you as a team, even though it is not directly in the questions or in the scoring criteria, it's on you as a team to explain to the selection committee why it's so important for you to do this project together. And only you can answer that question. I can't tell you how to do that, but why is it important for you to work together? And more importantly, why is it important to the implementation? That's what selection committees are really looking for, because otherwise you could apply as an individual. And so that's important for you to do as a team. You don't want to leave in any scenario, individual or team, you don't want to leave the selection committee member with any questions like, why is the math teacher on this project? Or how are they going to work together? How will these two schools work together after this project? What's the end result? You don't want to leave them with any questions. And I think teams do have that extra burden of explaining that in their narrative. Alicia, do you think that is answering that question?
Yes, I think so. We just have one more clarification for the section 3, the teacher growth and
Sure.
learning section.
Yep.
Do you want to talk more about how, maybe teacher A and teacher B is a good way to address how each teacher is going to find a way to meet their own personal learning goals professionally as well?
Yes, I think for teams in that particular section, there's not really a collaborative personal goal. You're each going to have your own unique goals, and that's okay. If that's how you want to write it, that's up to you. But again, I would not leave the selection committee wondering, well, what happened to that other teacher? Or this is only about this particular teacher. You want all team members reflected. We've had a few of these kind of larger teams recently, which are teams where there's one teacher from every subject or one teacher from every grade level in a particular, let's say an elementary school. They might have a more communal goal or a more clear goal of what professional development might mean for them as a team. That's a very specific kind of project, and that generally doesn't apply to everyone, but that's the only example I can really think of that there might be that communal professional goal for them. But that's pretty rare. We don't see that very often.
Okay, another common question that we've
Mhm.
had just while you're looking at the sections
Mhm.
specifically, do you feel like the selection committee has a preference over, let's say, like a teacher who has multiple different subject areas do they teach? Should they focus on one subject area? Or if a teacher has multiple goals, should they focus on mini goals? Or do you feel like it's better to focus in on one thing?
Mhm.
Does it get watered down, or does something feel stronger if it's really just honed in and focused? How do you feel about that?
So As I told you at the top, we won't tell you what to do. But I will say that sometimes it can be overwhelming to a selection committee member if there are just so many goals that it almost becomes unrealistic that you will be able to successfully address all of them. That's not to say that it can't be done. A really skilled writer, I've seen it, they can do it, but I do think sometimes too much is just too much. And having strong goals, I would say I don't want to tell you what to do, but maybe don't go three or four, or maybe three is the max, or I wouldn't want you to limit yourself, but you also want the reader to feel like this is something you can accomplish. A funny example we see is I want to go learn a new language and I'm going to learn it in 2 weeks, all the while learning about culture and um, where my students come from. And I'm going to do a homestay and I have like 50 different goals related to culture and language. And some of those are very accomplishable in 2 to 3 weeks. Learning a new language in 2 to 3 weeks, probably not realistic, but it's not that it shouldn't be there. It might just be a secondary goal. You have your primary goals of connecting to your students' culture and backgrounds. You want to understand where they come from. You want to do that homestay because you want to know what it feels like to be the new person, to be the person who doesn't speak the language, to really understand where your students are coming from. And maybe a secondary or tertiary goal is, and I'm also going to get exposure to this language that will help me better communicate with my students, but maybe that's not my primary goal. So I have a lot of things I want to do, but realistically, these are the things I can accomplish. In terms of like if you teach more than one subject area, that's really up to you. What about this experience will connect, you know, if you teach two or three subjects, three might be pushing it, but two, I think Alicia would agree. We've seen many applicants and fellows be able to accomplish things interdisciplinary or cross curricularly. Um, it's more for you to have to explain and it's more detail you have to include. And again, you just want it to be realistic to the reader. So that's only something you can decide. But I would say it's generally a good rule of thumb not to try to just to do too much or cram too much in.
We have one more really good budget
Mhm.
question before I'm going to let Stephanie go on. And I know she's already talked about this, but what if you're under your budget for a $5,000 for an individual or for $10,000 for a team? There is an itemized budget
Mm.
section built into the application itself. So it will total up per section how much money you're going to need for your project. And it will say at the bottom at applicant's expense. So if your project is $5,500, it's going to show how much money you're over, which is totally fine. The selection committee does not have we ask them not to come in with any bias for that. If you are going to be over, maybe you say in your budget narrative, I am prepared to take on the overage. I've got the money that exceeds the $5,000 grant so that you can give the selection committee confidence that you're going to be able to execute the grant. And then again, if you're worried about asking for the full grant amount, please don't.
Don't.
We do not we do not award teachers money because they've only asked for $2,000 of it. We don't allow our selection committees to come in with that bias saying, oh, well, let's give these teachers that. They were so frugal and only asked for this much money. No, not at all. We want to give you exactly what you need to complete your learning project, what you need to best address the needs of your school, your community, your students. So good question.
Perfect. Okay. Right now, I'm going to kind of pivot to the process of applying. So, how you can get started and some resources that we feel are really important to applicant success. So, the application opened on October 1st. All applications are due on January 22nd. It does not matter if you submit tomorrow or on January 22nd, they all go to selection at the same time. This is not a rolling process. So you don't need to worry about that. 70% of applicants submit the day before, so don't worry. Like we are not looking at when you submitted, but just make sure you get it in by January 22nd at 5 p.m. Central Time. The application will close at 5 p.m. Central. Okay, so the number one resource that we really think is a good place to start, if you haven't already, is our online learning center. There you will find our scoring criteria, which we talked a lot about during the proposal section. You'll find a list of benefits that we think teachers would have as a result of our grant. We have another presentation. So if you think I'm super confusing and you'd rather just read something, we have another presentation you can look at that's there. There's a link to our project search where you can go back and look at previously awarded fellows. So if you're interested in math, you can just search by math. If you want to see if someone in your school or district has been awarded, you can search by school or district. Subject area, destination, all kinds of ways that you can search, but that's a tool that's there for you. There's also a timeline. So tonight I give you this general timeline. You will have to review the application guidelines, which we'll talk about. But those people don't usually go back to. So the Online Learning Center has a lot of resources that you can go back to many times throughout the process. We're also starting a set of articles that we think will help prepare applicants through the process. It's a lot of what we will discuss tonight, but there will be new articles throughout the application process. There are 3 there now, and we anticipate 2 to 3 more before the deadline. And those are just helpful tips. The second piece of advice I could give you is if you haven't started already, so if you haven't registered through our application for a 2026 account, please do so. Before you can even put in your email address, we make you review our application guidelines. They are so full of good information, expectations, the questions we went over that are in the proposal. We don't want to waste your time and we don't want you to waste ours. And so that's going to show you what's eligible, what's not, deadlines, expectations. It's just really important stuff in there, and it's important that you fully read those before you start the process. So if you don't hear anything else I said tonight, please read the application guidelines. I think we've already had, since October the 1st, 3 or 4 applications that are not eligible. Either the teacher is not or the proposal was not. And so don't, save yourself that heartache and read the guidelines so you know what the expectations are and the eligibility. The third piece of advice I can give you on this timeline is to download the scoring criteria. That is available both in the Online Learning Center and the application guidelines. This ties in to the next point on this timeline of asking for others for help. I strongly encourage you not only to use that criteria for yourself as you're writing, but every time that you get someone to proofread or review your proposal, you give them a copy of that criteria and you ask them to score it. And anywhere that you are not getting all the points, I would go back and look at that section of the proposal and see what you can do to strengthen it or what's missing. So I would definitely download that scoring criteria and use it. Point number 4, ask other people for help. Don't just ask the English teacher for grammar and spelling help or, structural help with your proposal. Ask if you're the art teacher that's applying, get another art teacher to just lay some eyes on it. If you're interested in collaborating with maybe another kind of teacher, maybe a science teacher, a math teacher, have your math or your science teacher review it for you. But again, going back to who's on our selection committee, have someone who's not in education review your proposal and give you some feedback or score it using the criteria, because they'll help you see those little areas where maybe you use language they're not familiar with or a concept they're not familiar with, and that can only help you improve your proposal. And then the last thing I want you to do is I want you to apply. Please apply. January 22nd, again, is the deadline at 5 p.m. Central. This is, again, like I said at the top, this is not a proposal that you can write in an hour or two. This is something that you're really going to need to spend some time with. We time this presentation because at this time of year, because we know you're going into the holiday season, and I know most of us don't have even an extra minute to spare, but if you do during the break, just break it up over, from between today, the middle of November until the middle of January. If you do just little pieces, maybe you start your research now, then you do an outline, then you get a little bit of feedback just on the idea, then you start writing the proposal, and then you get a little more feedback. By January, you can have a really excellent and thorough grant proposal. But I would implore you not to wait until January 21st to start this, because then I just ask you, just wait till next year. Things don't change much from year to year at Fun for Teachers. So if this is something that you feel like maybe a little too big this year, start researching for next year now, and give yourself enough time to prepare. So we've touched on a lot of grant writing tips, not only from Alicia and I's program officer point of view, but our selection committee's point of view. Just little pieces of advice that we've picked up over the years. But these are some really specific grant writing tools that I think, if you're an experienced grant writer, these are things you probably already know. But we find a lot of applicants come to us as first time grant writers. And these are tips that not only will help you in Fun for Teachers process, but in any other grant that you're writing. So if this doesn't apply to you, please, you can just ignore me for the next 30 seconds. But if you are a new grant writer, these are really important. And the first is a message that you'll always hear from Fun for Teachers is ask for help. Not only from our team here at Fun for Teachers, Alicia, Salma, our other program officer, lots of other officers from our other um, specific partner locations, the national office, we're all here to help you. But there's also people in your own community and environment that can help you, whether that's a peer at school. If your district happens to have a grant coordinator or a grant writer, they're awesome resources on putting together a proposal, or even seeking out other opportunities to pair with this proposal. But as we mentioned on the last slide, it's just really great to get a lot of different perspectives and eyes on your proposal, keeping in mind who makes up the selection committee. So reach out to those non-educators and ask them for help. It's only going to help you. I know it's hard to ask for help, and you have to make time to ask for help, but it is something that I think is worth it in any grant preparation process. And this is another thing I keep alluding to, the time. Our proposal requires a good level of detail. It's not something that you can just write a one sentence answer to each section. It really requires a good amount of information and research and detail. You don't want to leave any committee member with a lingering question of something that you could have answered in your narrative. We give you 25,000 characters with spaces, which I think when we last checked was, I think it's 5 single spaced pages. That's a lot of real estate. So you have a lot of space to answer these questions. So make sure you're including the necessary detail to really explain why this project is not only important to you, but your students and your school community. Don't leave anybody with any questions. This one it can be a little silly, but we really ask you to watch your tone. If you start out with like really big issues, that one grant proposal isn't going to be able to solve all of those issues, right? Readers sort of are like, this isn't going to do that. And so they kind of move on from it. It's not believable. It's the same thing as maybe trying to do too much. But if you're negative, is this grant going to solve that negativity? That's one way of looking at tone. Another way we look at tone is aspirational tone. So a lot of applicants will say, maybe I'll be able to go to this museum, or maybe I'll do this with my students. The parents might want to do this, or my principal might allow me, or I think I like to do this. Instead of that kind of passive language, you want to be more active, more aspirational tone. I will, I can, I have my principal's permission. I've sought out these experts. I can make this happen. So you're showing the reader a level of commitment that's it's sort of subliminal. It's like it's an underlying tone and current that the reader will find believable and that they buy into. Man, this person is confident. I really know that they can get this done. They're going to see this from proposal to the implementation of this project. And so that kind of tone you also want to watch. I've said it about 10 times now, you're tired of hearing it, but take your time. Successful grant writing is not something that happens overnight. You really need to start early and break it into digestible pieces of things that you can really accomplish between now and January 22nd. And this should go without saying, but please, for the love of God, proofread your proposal. It's we don't have a spell check in our system. It's just a plain text system. And so when you're cutting and pasting or you're writing directly into those text boxes, there's no spell check, there's no grammar check. If you don't hear another thing that I say tonight, please prepare your proposal in a word processor, whether that's Word or Google Docs, something that's easy to share with people when you're getting feedback. Please write your proposal in a word processor. Not only is it going to help you with spelling and grammar and getting help and getting feedback, but then when it's time to come into our system, all you have to do is copy and paste it right in. But beyond all that, you will not see spelling and grammar on our scoring criteria. It's not something you're getting points for necessarily, but those are mental points. And if a selection committee sees that you rushed through this and you made really preventable errors in terms of spelling or grammar or miscopying and mispasting things or putting things in the wrong section, to them it shows that you didn't really take your time to prepare, and you lose a little bit of credibility in that they may not believe that if you didn't put in the time up front, you're not going to put in the time at the end. And so whether it's Fund for Teachers or another grant application you're composing, make sure you're doing spelling and grammar checks. We don't expect you to be, a Pulitzer Prize winner submitting this. I'm a terrible writer, but at least I'll make sure that I don't have poor spelling and poor grammar. And that's another reason why we ask you for feedback, because we ask you to get feedback from others, because people will catch those things for you. Other readers will get that and they'll help you and they'll fix it. And then you can submit the best proposal you can. And then the last tip that I could give you, and we touched on it a little bit, is junk the jargon. We use a lot of language in education that people who have not been in a classroom since they were a student will not understand. We hear a lot about things like state standards, like you might name the standard, like TX.232715. An average reader is not going to know what that is, and you shouldn't expect them to go look it up. You should name the standard. There's funny things like a graphic organizer. What is that? I still don't know, but a lot of times we see that in a proposal. You might use acronyms like PLC. Someone who's not a teacher may not know what a PLC is. So explain that to them. If you want to use those abbreviations, the first time you use it, maybe in parentheses, just explain what it is and then go on and use that abbreviation. We're not saying you can't use that kind of language or abbreviations or acronyms, but at least explain it the first time you use it so that non-educators will understand what they are. Another thing that I think you'd be, or maybe you're not shocked because you deal with the general public every day in terms of parents and school community, but I'm always shocked at the number of people who don't know what Title I, Title II, Title IX, Title X, and any of those titles stand for. They don't really know what those mean. So if you're going to say, I teach in a Title I school, either just explain what Title I means or don't say Title I, just give what that actually means. What does free and reduced lunch mean? Who qualifies for that? Most non-educators or people who are not in a district or state capacity, they may not know what that is. And so it's the kind of language that we use every day that maybe the general public doesn't really know what it is. And I'm going to just keep going back to it. When you get a non-educator to review your proposal, they can kind of suss out these places where you've maybe used that language or a phrase they're not familiar with and can help you clarify it. So again, these are just general grant writing tips. They're good just to know, even if it's not for Fund for Teachers. So we really want you to apply online. You must apply online. We really want you to apply. The application is open. Again, it's due January 22nd by 5 p.m. Central. Please make note of that deadline. That is 5 p.m. Central, which is 6 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Mountain, and 3 p.m. Pacific. I think I got it. So note that in your own personal time zone. Please prepare your proposal in a word processor, so all you have to do is copy and paste into our system. Um, Please ask for help, not only in the preparation of your proposal and people outside of Fund for Teachers that you ask for, but please reach out to us at Fund for Teachers, whether it's you have a technical problem, you have a question you didn't get answered here tonight, you have an idea that you just want to run by someone. We're here to help. That's Alicia and I's primary job. And so let us do that job. Let us help you. We are real people. We answer the phone, we answer emails. We do not have tech support somewhere else. Like, we are it. So we can help you. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and ask for help, or email us. We're available to you. That's our main goal, is to help support you through this process. All applicants will receive notification of whether or not they were awarded. So whether you're awarded or whether you're not, we will notify you by email at the email that you use to register. So if you have not registered already, please consider registering with an email that you check frequently and you know that is not going to get stuck in spam, someone who maybe hasn't emailed you frequently. We are finding more and more that Fund for Teachers emails are getting stuck in district spam, like blocked altogether, that you won't even know that we ever sent you anything. So please keep that in mind as you start the process, because we will send that notification to that email notifying you on March 31st. So whether you're awarded or not, you should receive a notification from us. If you're applying as a team, every member of the team will receive a notification. If you have registered already, this is a good test. If you have registered for our system, in our system already, you should have received an email telling you you registered. If you did not receive that email, there is a good chance that your district or your school is blocking our email. Now, you can have them whitelist us, or we can change your primary email. It's whatever works better for you, but please keep that in mind and just keep an eye on that if you aren't receiving our emails. So again, please apply by January 22nd at 5 p.m. Central. We are here to help. Please email us, call us. We want to help you through this process and we want you to be successful. So this is the point where we really spend the remainder of the evening answering your questions. If you feel good about what you've heard tonight, you're free to go. We, of course, will answer any questions you have on phone or email. But if you need to leave the presentation, this is a good time to go if you feel like you've had your questions answered. Again, we will email everyone who registered a copy of the presentation, the recording, and links to all the resources that we discussed tonight, from the story about the fellow at the beginning to the online learning center, the project search, all the things we talked about. So if you missed something or you didn't get it written down, we'll send it to you tomorrow. We generally get it out the next day, but if we don't, it will be no later than Friday morning. And you can reply to that and send your questions if you have them. Otherwise, please feel free to continue using the Q&A, and Alicia and I will continue answering your questions. And a special thank you to Melissa and Talon for interpreting for us tonight. Okay, Alicia, what do we have?
Okay, so another question that we always get at the end of every information session is, how competitive is the grant? How many teachers apply? How many do we award every year?
It's very competitive. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. I don't have the numbers in front of me for last year, but there's no set percentage. We have a set budget every year, which has not been set for 2026 yet, so I don't know what the total budget will be. But we award on merit alone. So we'll basically, we run out of money. I will say that it's very competitive. There are a few areas that have a donor that pays for a particular area, so they may have a different percentage of what is funded and what is not. It also depends largely on how many team applications we get versus individual applications, because if more teams apply, the money goes faster, less applications are awarded. I think, and Alicia, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like we were just under 20% overall of what we awarded and what was received. I believe that that's what it was last year. We don't anticipate any major shifts this year in funding areas, new donors. Everything should remain pretty much the same. But you don't get it if you don't try. But as I keep reminding you, this is not an easy thing, and I will say that it's very easy to dismiss applications that have one sentence answers per section. So I think that's a good place to start with. If you're interested in doing it, you just need to do it. And I'm sorry, I don't have a set percentage every year. There's just too many variables. But last year, I think it was just under 20%.
Then a follow-up question. Is there a certain amount awarded to each state? There was somebody who asked earlier in the evening, do we have a quota for California? So if you want to
No,
speak to that,
there's
Stephanie.
again, the selection process is completely anonymous. The majority of our applications come from across the country where there is not a single donor. So like, unless you're in Connecticut, Wyoming, or Oklahoma, those are the three states where we have, and Ohio, and one county in Oregon, you are not going to be read in where you live. And there is no quota by state. Again, it's purely based on the quality of your application. We don't set out any quota on subject area, team or individual, where you're going. We don't have any kind of, I don't like the word quota, but there's no quota for any of those. There's no set number of dollars for a certain subject area, or at least not this year. Sometimes we might have a donor who's interested in one thing or another, but in 2026, to my knowledge, we do not have any donors who have explicit limitations on what their funds can be used for, which is good for you, because the more that we can award the best of the best. It doesn't matter to us what the subject is, where you're going, what you're doing. It's really the best application being funded is what's important to us.
And then maybe also, Stephanie, if you could address some of the questions that we ask in the cover sheet specifically, because we're capturing some survey information as well. So even though it's an anonymous selection process, if you could talk about why we capture some of that information. And for example, we ask if it's if someone's been awarded a Fund for Teachers grant in the past, have we ever taken that into consideration, and why we capture some survey information.
Sure. So just like you, we apply for grants ourselves. That's how we fund our program. And so a lot of the questions are things that potential funders of Fund for Teachers are interested in. That's the majority of what you see on your cover sheet. Some of it is obviously related to your grant itself, and what we do if you're awarded, but we just collect it all at the beginning. So things like what subject, the tags, or what you teach. We use that if you're awarded to maybe pair you with other teachers who are doing something similar. Maybe they have a similar project. Maybe you want to connect with someone who is also an art teacher in rural school. That's how we use that information. Related to the question that we ask you, how many times have you applied, or if you've been awarded, that helps us see patterns. So are we offering enough resources? Is this information session junk, or is it helpful? If you attend, do we see better outcomes for those teachers? If you've applied before, how many times did it take you to apply? How many times did you apply before you were awarded? While it's not part of the selection process, it is a helpful tool for us internally in how we prepare to better support applicants, but it's not used in the selection process.
Okay, so if we have people who are choosing to, is there any bias over writing an application that is maybe choosing to go with a specific tour company over creating their own roadmap.
No, not at all. It doesn't matter how you accomplish your goals. It's that you've explained very well why this was the best vehicle for you to meet your goals. So, generally speaking, 80% of our applicants are women, and more than half of our applicants travel outside of the United States for their fellowship. There is a level of comfort and safety with a tour group, and that is something that is fair to include in your budget, in your proposal. There's also just sometimes tour groups have everything lined up. It's just the perfect fit for you, and that works for you. But if you're not interested in going with a tour group because you haven't found one that meets all your goals, that's okay too. The committee just wants to know, how are you going to meet all those learning goals, in what activities, and why that vehicle to meet those goals is the best one for you. But it makes no difference to Fund for Teachers how you accomplish those goals as long as it's realistic. And honestly, each selection committee, so your proposals are read in small groups. No one reads more than 12 at a time. So they don't have anything to compare it to. They're only reading what's in front of them. So it doesn't matter to individual readers generally how you are going to accomplish those goals, as long as you made a good case for how you're going to meet those goals and why you chose that way to meet those goals.
What happens if someone applies for a conference or a workshop and then they find out they're awarded, but then their workshop is filled up or their conference is no longer taking place?
So that's a great question. And I want you to leave feeling confident that we are flexible. We're flexible about a lot of things. We know that life happens. You can't control, um, the rate at which a conference fills or a workshop. If that were to happen, you would come to Fund for Teachers and explain that that happened, and we would ask you to find a comparable conference or workshop or a comparable experience that you could still meet your goals or the majority of your goals. We award your proposal based on what the selection committee saw. So it's important to us that you are still meeting those goals, but we know that sometimes plans fall through. I mean, we made it through the pandemic. So really at this point, we are very flexible and understanding of when stuff happens that we don't have control over, we just have to go with it. And so if there's a weather disaster, natural disaster, political instability, these are all things that happen all the time. Conferences fill up, workshops fill up, things happen. Your life happens. Maybe you can't go when you thought you could go. As long as you're communicating to Fund for Teachers and you're meeting the goals that you set forth, or the majority of those goals, that's what's important to us. So have some comfort in knowing that flexibility. But please know that our flexibility can only go as far as you communicate. And so making sure that you're constantly communicating with us any changes. I think that's all the questions we've received so far. Again, Alicia and I are happy to answer more. Oh, do you want to read that one, Alicia?
Sure. So are there any different things taken into consideration for team proposals?
Yes. Okay, so the question I think is, are there things that that team applicants need to keep in mind as they're writing, or what they need to add to show collaboration in their proposal? And yes, it is very important for you to demonstrate to the selection committee, despite it's not directly in the rubric or the criteria, and it is not directly in the questions. It is still important for you to explain to the selection committee why your collaboration is important to the success of this project. You really should acknowledge that collaboration between your schools, or how that will happen as a result of this project, what that will look like, whether that's curriculum, or not, whether that's an event or a pen pal relationship or something else that you dream up for your schools to collaborate. But it is on you to explain what that collaboration is why that collaboration is important in terms of applying together and also in terms of implementation and what happens for your students and school community. Sherry, I hope that was clear.
Do you want to say anything about our affinity groups, if we've got additional workshops coming up? Heather Davis has a question about another workshop coming up on December 3rd for rural educators.
If that applies, so we have a funder who is interested in funding rural schools. And so we do have some extra, I don't want to say extra, but we do provide some additional resources in those cases where we have a funder who wants to focus on a particular group. And this year we do have a funder who is interested in rural educators. So we do have a group of past grant rural teacher awardees who will be providing support to rural applicants. So the session on the 3rd is not a full information session like tonight, but you will have the opportunity to engage with other rural educators. And Alicia, correct me if I'm wrong on that. But you would only know about that if you have applied in the system and marked yourself as a rural educator.
Yes, correct. Sorry, I was typing it. I was going to answer that. I was typing another answer, and so I was trying to like give you one to answer while I was answering another one. So yes, what Stephanie said, and it will be a little bit different than what was shared here tonight.
And I joke a lot about this, but if you think I'm terrible, there's another session in December. So you can come back. It's the same thing. We haven't decided who's leading it yet, but the one that's on December, is it December 10th, Alicia? On
Yes.
December 10th is the same format as this. So now that you know how this is formatted, you could come just the last 30 minutes and ask the questions you didn't get tonight if there's still things that you feel like are left on the table. But you have our email, our phone, and we have a really strong presence on social media, on Instagram, Facebook. I'm tiptoeing into TikTok, but we're also on those platforms. We have a podcast. I suggest if you're not already following us on those platforms, the podcast is really great to hear from teachers who have been awarded and what kind of the impetus was of how they came up for the idea of their grant proposal. So where you are today, what they were thinking, and then ultimately how they've implemented what they learned in their classrooms or in their communities. And so I think that's really just a great inspirational thing to hear, but it's also helpful in making this feel real. Those are real applicants and real fellows. So that's a great resource. If you are someone who feels comfortable on social platforms and you don't mind sending a DM to someone that you see as a past fellow, our fellows are so responsive. We see a lot of connection on social media. So if that's something that you're into and you see a story on someone that you'd like to connect to, if you message that person or you leave a comment on one of our posts, I would not be surprised if they get back to you. All of our fellows are really helpful and want to support you. And so if you feel like maybe this is enough from the administrative side of Fund for Teachers, but you want to see more of the real what teachers are doing, our social platforms are it. The podcast is great. We have a Thanksgiving episode coming out. It's available now, but it will be published on socials on Tuesday, I believe. And we also have a blog on our website, which is also great stories, and that's searchable. So if there's something you're interested in and you want to see if someone has done it before, you can search the blog. But those are also great resources. And I'd highly encourage you to just go through the website. There's a lot of good stuff. I don't see any other questions. and I want to honor your time tonight. I know we budgeted an hour and a half of your time, and we're just under that right now. Um, so please do email us, call us if you think of anything else, make those connections on social. And we'll be in touch with you either tomorrow or early Friday with the recording of this session and links to all the resources we've talked about. And I'll even include the podcast that comes out this week so you can take a listen if you have the time. But thank you so much for joining. And again, thank you to Taylin and Melissa for their time tonight. And thank you, Alicia. Have a good night, everyone. Okay, I stopped recording, but we can take questions if anyone